Hello and welcome to the Voice of Standard Users, a podcast brought to you by IFAN. I'm Chaim Oren, your host, and in each episode I speak with leaders shaping industries through standards and practice. And I have the pleasure of introducing you to our today's guest, Sonya Bird. Sonya is the Vice President of International Standards at UL Standards and Engagement, a nonprofit standard development and advocacy organization that translates safety science into practical standards, from toasters to life jackets and lithium-ion batteries to solar power. The organization also serves as a vital resource for policymakers as well as advocates for standards and policies to create a safer, more sustainable world. Sonia brings extensive experience in standardization and international engagement with a strong focus on ensuring that standards are practical, relevant, and responsive to stakeholder needs. Throughout her career, Sonia has actively participated in national and international standards initiatives, advocating for effective stakeholder engagement and emphasizing the importance of user perspective in the development of standards. Hello, Sonia, and welcome to our podcast.
Hello, Chaim, and thank you so much for having me.
Great. So let's start by, I will turn to the first question. Sonia, do you remember the first time you became aware of standards? And what was the situation? And what did you think about standards at that point?
I call myself one of the lucky ones
Okay.
because I found standards right out of college. I was looking for a job and I answered a want ad. This goes back so many years. Answered an ad in the newspaper for a job that was looking for an engineer with good writing skills. And I was just graduating with a degree in electrical engineering, but I did enjoy writing. And I had never considered putting those two together. But that's what I did. I answered that ad. I got the job, and it's been wonderful ever since. But for me, it was interesting that, I always kind of really thought standards were about quality. I think up until that time, I had heard about high standards or adhering to standards. But in my mind, it really meant a high bar for quality. And once I joined UL at the time Underwriters Laboratories, I learned very quickly the importance of safety standards. And
Right.
of course, that's been at the heart of standards development at UL Standards and Engagement for well over 100 years. So I'm one of many who have contributed to the work of standards in the UL family.
Fascinating. Okay, so at what moment did you realize that standards actually have a real impact on how organization, markets, and people work day to day?
So I would say, just as many of us in standards, people ask what we do, what it's about. And I
Right.
remember shortly after joining UL, I had a conversation with my father about the work that I was doing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and at that time, I was assigned work on standards for portable and stationary tools. So think
Mhm.
about table saws, drills, miter saws, circular saws, things like that. And I was talking about some of the work that was taking place and the elements of the safety standards that were associated with tools. And that
Mhm.
included things like the protective guards and markings and instructions. And
Right.
he asked a few questions of me. He's asking about some of the guards on the tool that he had in his hand, and he's tools that he had seen over the years, some of the changes. And it hit home to me during that conversation that the work that I was doing as a standards developer had a direct impact on the safety of people that I love. And that was
Mm.
really a cool feeling, to see that the work I was doing,
Yes.
yeah, at such a young age really, was about protecting people. And that just I knew then I had found the right place to be and knew that I was going to be able to make a real impact.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, was there an experience where you clearly saw why it is so important for users to have a voice in the development of standards?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'd say, standards aren't visible. As standards, many people
Exactly.
don't know about the existence of
Right.
standards, but
Yeah.
you and I know standards are everywhere, right? That they drive so much of what happens, so many of the products that we work on, so many of the processes that protect us around the world. And
Hmm.
impact really is felt by many. And I know when we develop standards, we want diversity around the table, and we need people with different backgrounds and experiences and education to contribute to that standard in order to make it really as complete as possible.
Right.
And I know at UL Standards and Engagement, just like at many standards developers, we rely on inputs from manufacturers and regulators, academia, consumers, testing organizations, and others really to bring their expertise to the table. I'd say when we develop standards, we always want to consider how that product or service covered by the standard will ultimately be used. We need to keep that user, that end goal in mind, and
Right.
really make sure that we're considering, shall we say, real life scenarios and
Hmm.
expectations.
Right.
Um, and one of the tools that's been used in a number of UL standards, and I know IEC has a similar tool, is something called a probe, an articulated probe, which, if you think about it, is really just a finger. It's been called out in many standards, and it was developed so many years ago to protect people from touching live parts or moving parts in a product. So
Okay.
think about a fan, right?
Right.
And you've got that rotating blade in a fan. And you don't want anyone, whether it's a man, a woman, a child, to be able to put their finger in there and access that moving
Absolutely.
part
Yep.
and get hurt. And so this probe that was created had to consider anyone who might really come into contact with that product and think about how to protect anyone. And so I know that at UL there was quite a bit of research done to think about the length and the width of a man's finger and a woman's finger and a child's finger
Mm.
and
Right.
coming up with that probe. And so for me, I think that's the one of the important pieces is really thinking ultimately about
Right.
the end user of the product and making sure that we really are doing everything we can to protect them.
Right. So really standards are, I would say, the business infrastructure, right? They're so important, but still not many people are aware of their criticality to the product safety and usage.
No, you're exactly right. And it's about the product safety and usage. And of course, standards at the heart, in my mind, they build trust. And there's this sense of
Right.
I think people expect that they're protected when they use a good quality product. They expect to be protected, but the standards are really what makes it so. And creating a standard, publishing a standard is wonderful, but then the standard has to be used. Manufacturers have to look at that standard and use that standard as the basis of their design, because all the best knowledge around safety has gone into developing that standard, and so manufacturers need to consider that when they're developing their products, and then ultimately the standards need to be used for testing, and so we think about having those standards called out in regulations, having organizations, choose to rely on those standards to
Hmm.
protect individuals around the world.
Right. So can you share, Sonia, a story where a user perspective, maybe your own, influenced a discussion or change an outcome?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I was lucky enough to be asked to be part of a joint strategic advisory group between IEC and ISO a number of years ago, and that group was addressing gender responsive standards.
I see.
And I learned so much as part of that group. But we just think about the differences between a man and a woman. And of course, you've got physical differences and, height, weight. size of a person's hand. But there are
Mm-hmm.
so many other things that you don't think about. Hormonal differences, differences in skin thickness and body fat percentage, voice ranges. And so
Wow. Okay.
well, and I say voice because it's in the course of that project, in the course of working on the Joint Strategic Advisory Group, we really had a number of great examples of where gender plays into it. And voice was one of those. So if you think about using voice recognition software,
Right. Yeah.
initially it was most of it would react more to a man's voice correctly to a
Ah.
man's voice than to a woman's voice.
Mm.
And so, that could play a little bit of havoc if a woman's driving down the road and is using voice command for navigation, to trying to find something for navigation, just as an example. But what I've been able to do, and this is, you talk about my user perspective, my own, is be able to take some of those concepts from that Joint Strategic Advisory Group and really promote them. And it's in my mind, Chaim, it's really trying to raise awareness
Right.
about the importance of the fact that differences exist in the people who are using the products and the services. And that's been I think, a really exciting topic for me to be able to take forward, is just to be able to think about, how we can make sure that these differences that exist are considered in the development of a standard. And there have been a number of, I'd say, really good changes made in recent years. I know that one of the examples that we talked about a lot, um, in terms of differences between men and women, is with um, the crash test dummy that's used in cars. and
Okay. Okay.
and I know, it was a generic body form, modeled after a man, and as a result, it was found that women were not necessarily protected at the same degree as a man
Wow.
in a
Okay.
similar crash. And so
Interesting.
I know there have been changes made to the crash test dummies, which is wonderful. Just to think about that a woman may be shorter, or exactly how a
Right.
harness would fit across her body compared to a man's. And so
Hmm.
that, to me, is very exciting. We're also seeing organizations who focus on personal protective equipment. Think about firefighter gear, making sure that a woman's body size and dimensions are considered, as
Yes.
well.
Indeed.
If someone's
Yeah.
going in to protect to fight a fire, you want them protected. So
Yeah. Very interesting. So, as a woman working in standardization, what are the times when you felt you had to make a special effort to be heard? How that shaped your approach? Because
yes.
typically standards are dominated by men, right?
Yes, historically, I would say they've been dominated by men. And dominated's not even probably the right word. Men were the ones who were sitting around the table developing standards, and
Right.
give them a lot of kudos and really a lot of appreciation for all the work that went into developing standards historically. And yes, I started over 36 years ago. In most of my committees, I was the only woman, or maybe,
Wow.
one of just a few. Well, but I was used to it. I mentioned I went
Mm.
to, I got my degree in electrical engineering. I think there were so few of us in my classes then. So
Hmm.
I was used to working and being in an environment around a lot of men.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I didn't feel that out of place because of being a woman. I had a couple of other things, though, that were fighting against me because I was young. I was in my young
Right.
20s at the time, and I'd say average age at that time anyway around the room was probably 50.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
was
That's
young
a
and
major difference.
inexperienced,
Yep.
a major difference. Yeah, a young, inexperienced, and a woman. So I kind of had three things going against me. Um,
Mm.
but, for me, I learned the best way to be heard was to be prepared. And so that meant for me, reading what I could find on a subject or asking questions of people that I
Right.
trusted, those who had more experience, finding someone in the room who was willing to work with me and teach me a little bit. And then most importantly, volunteering for assignments and doing things that I said I would do. And so I kind of think of it a lot about building a reputation as someone who cares
Right.
and then as someone who can be counted on to do the right thing. And so that was my approach going into it.
To
And
overcome this bias, right? Yeah.
to overcome the challenges perhaps of being one of the few people in the room. Um, but a lot's changed in 36 years. And many of the groups that I'm part of now have, I'd say, close to equal representation, men and
Wow,
women.
that's a major change. Yeah.
It's a major change. I think we still are looking for trying to get more, women involved at the younger levels. We still need women to focus or young ladies to focus on STEM as they come through school to be prepared, to be engaged. But yeah, it's a major change because I'm no longer the only one, and that's a really good feeling. And I think a lot of the standards developers, IEC, ISO, and
Yeah.
UL standards and engagement, many signed the UN ECE Declaration on Gender Responsive Standards
Right.
a few years ago, and that that has been, I think, a big turning point with how we look at women in standards now. And part of that declaration meant coming up with a gender action plan,
Right.
growing diversity on technical committees, educating about the need for gender responsive standards, and so
Mm.
I think that's helped with as I mentioned some of the positive change that we've seen in having more and more women engaged.
So this brings me to the next question, which is looking back, how do you think diversity of experience, including women's perspective, actually leads to better, more usable standards?
Yeah, so thank you for that. We mentioned earlier, men historically had been the ones at the table,
Yeah.
and they would do the best they could with the information they had, right? And I think what I have found is by having diversity, having more women engaged, having people of different backgrounds, people from different countries, small manufacturers versus large manufacturers,
Right.
every
Yes.
type of diversity brings a slightly different perspective. And that's so important because as we're sitting there at the table, we are experts. You can't see me, but I'm putting it in quotes. We're experts about about certain pieces of the topic, right?
Right.
No one person can sit down and write a perfect standard, but
Mm.
a group of diverse people can come close to that, right? And having those different perspectives really are just critical to make sure that we all are thinking about um, it's just differences in approach, differences in use, and unique needs. And ultimately, I like to think of the term standards for all. We really want the standards that we develop to protect, anyone who's going
Everyone.
to
Right.
use it. Yes, yeah, man, woman, whether you're, I mean, just from a large country, a small country. I mean, yeah, you want
Mm.
everyone protected. And that's ultimately, I think, what we want to get to. And there's so many types of diversity. We talk about women, but geographic diversity, age, differences in age and
Right.
experience levels. We work hard now to have more and more young professionals involved in standards development. And that's
Right.
critical, because I am by far not technologically savvy. And it's so important,
Mm.
for
That
me
the young people come. Yeah.
that the young people come. Yes, because they bring different. knowledge, different experiences, and
Exactly.
it's vital. It really is.
Especially with AI and digitalization trends.
E- exactly, exactly.
So, in essence, you're saying that diversity is a key success factor for developing usable standards, right?
Yes, that's
Did I
put that
sum
very
it well?
well. You said it well.
Okay, very good. So, finally, for the International Women's Day, what would you say to women who use standards every day but don't yet see themselves as part of the standardization community?
So that's a really good question. And first of all, I would say that the door is open because just just as you and I just talked about, having diversity at the table is so important.
Right,
And people need to recognize that women need to recognize that there is a place for them at the table, and
mm,
that diversity means so much. And I would encourage any woman who has an interest to reach out to standards developers, reach out to those individuals who are involved in standards development, and see how they can get involved. And there are multiple ways. One way is to be a voting member on a technical committee, but
right,
UL Standards and Engagement and many other standards developers welcome comments as well. And then of course through the IEC and ISO processes, you can get engaged through your national committee. But that's what I would encourage women to do is reach out to those bodies and see how to get engaged and know that there is a place for them at the table. And having their voice really will help to ensure that products are developed with everyone's safety and usability in mind.
right. And you yourself, is a role model for that approach.
Well, thank you, Han. I appreciate that. I think it's just I love, like I said at the beginning, I love standards. I love the fact that they mean so much. They have such a positive impact on
Impact, yeah.
our daily lives. And yeah, so hopefully my enthusiasm will spill over and help other women decide they want to get involved.
I must tell you that it's catching. Your energy is catching.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
Well, this is a high note for as we reach the end of our podcast. So thank you very much, Sonia, for your valuable insights on standard developing that you shared with me and my listeners. And it was a real pleasure to talking to you. So at this opportunity, I would like to wish you lots of success in achieving your goals at UL Standards and Engagement and continue to do your pioneering work on standards development. And for our listeners, stay tuned for more exciting episodes and follow us on the IFAN LinkedIn page because standards make the world go round. See you soon.